Retro Now.
Hello there. This is James Arnold Taylor, the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and you're listening to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. Their behavior is continuously unexpected. So uncivilized.
Welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And we are not alone. We have a returning guest. Welcome back, Greg from the Rebel Base Card. How are you doing this evening?
Good. And it's great to see you both. It's great to be back. And I was very happy to see what section of this movie I got. Because it's been a hot minute since I really kind of had to focus on the Force Awakens, and I was like, oh, one, Daz is going to be very jealous because he is a big Rey fan, but two, it's going to be a fun segment, and I am so happy to be back.
Awesome.
Well, we are thrilled to have you. I've had an opportunity to talk to you a couple times recently on your podcast. We were previewing the year and looking back at Andor Season 2 and had a lot of fun. And so I decided to keep the party going and have you on for a change. But as Greg was suggesting, we are going to be talking about The Force Awakens. This is the second installment of our series for the year. But before we get started, Jay, this is where I ask you to share our social media contacts with everyone.
And this is where I'm happy to do so. We are on Facebook and Instagram conveniently at Podcast Stardust.
All right. The dish is aligned. The signal's boosted to maximum output. The shield is down. We are now broadcasting to the galaxy. So we'll be covering the section of the movie that runs from 10 minutes and 41 seconds to 23 minutes and 40 seconds. It's one of those cases where I try and keep it to about an even 10 minutes, but that cut off in the middle of a scene. So I extended it the extra 3 so we could finish things off. But we're going to meet Rey. We're going to have Finn and Poe attempt to escape from the Star Destroyer, and a lot of good stuff happening in this segment. But before we get into that, Greg, we start these episodes by asking our listeners a few questions about their experience with this movie. But when it comes to The Force Awakens, this was the first movie they released after the acquisition of Lucasfilm by Disney. So the first question I have for you is, where were you when you heard that Disney has acquired Lucasfilm and is going to be making new Star Wars movies, and what was your reaction to that?
It's tough because I don't have a forensic pinpoint for this. I remember probably seeing it online, but I think that maybe speaks to more of the fact that I was not connected to the greater Star Wars fandom, and really how out in the outer rim I was. I think we talked before. I remember when I was covering tech, I was blogging tech when Disney bought Marvel. And I do remember because that happened almost just right before I started at Apple. And, I remember even talking during my interview with the store leader about, like the mouse acquiring Spider-Man. But, it gets a little muddier when I think about, when Disney bought Star Wars. I remember, it was a lot of money, and I remember being, happy that, Disney had the kind of pockets to support what Star Wars could be. And, having gone back, I'm an OG, like you folks, and, I could take Star Wars all day, every day, but, to see the story pushed forward was very exciting. And, it's a fun lead up, I also remember when Star Trek Generations came out about, we were seeing the next gen folks transition into movies, but they still had the original characters, and kind of how sort of it was a little muddy. I mean, it was a good story, but there was just a lot of people they had to give screen time to. And I think, it's probably one of my bigger memories of not only that, but when the Force Awakens was announced and what was going to be in it, I'm like, man, that's just a lot. It's a lot of characters, and they have a lot ahead of them. But in a lot of ways, I was very happy how they pulled this off.
Mhm. Awesome. Well, our next question then is obviously The Force Awakens was the first movie in many, many moons for Star Wars. And so there was a lot of hype, there was a lot of, fan talk, that kind of thing. So what was your favorite theory or bit of hype leading up to the movie's release? Any rumors, the trailer, any piece of media that you saw that you remember? What really stuck with you?
I remember really liking, the cast photo where they're all kinda sitting around, and you're just kinda like going, "Wow, this is really gonna happen." And I remember seeing, and I'm like, now I'm getting goosebumps, um, the trailer when, you have Han Solo and Chewie going, "Chewie, we're home." And that really does hit because Han Solo is one of my favorite characters, um, and then, yeah, I remember, like, this bringing it to cards, right? This really kinda brought me back into trading cards because I was at a Target and I saw the Journey to the Force Awakens, and they had the promo cards, but, the whole series of the Journey to was in the classic Starfield of 1977 blues, and, then finding that, like, Walgreens had an exclusive, Walmart had an exclusive, that kinda got me back into it, and I collected so many of those cards, because I had no idea of what the hobby was going to be presenting to me later on. But that kinda got me excited. So it kinda felt like, man, we're starting over. And, BB-8 looks cool and Kylo Ren looks cool, and you got Finn and all the hullabaloo about Finn, taking his helmet on, like, "Oh my gosh, an African American stormtrooper, like, what is all this?" And all that, and just like, we don't know. And, it was just really it felt like there was gonna be a thing happening, and I know that, I wasn't in the States for the Phantom Menace, but I can only imagine it was probably something like that, where there was just such a build up to the movie being released, and we were all excited to go see it and
Mhm.
take my family to it for the first time.
Oh, yeah. That's awesome.
All right. So tell us about your first viewing. Who'd you go with, and what was the reaction?
Most likely, I would have probably taken, so let's see, if it's 2015, my son I would have taken my son I probably would have taken the entire family along because I kinda made a point years back, probably starting with the OGs, that I would see him. I'd try to see him at least 3 times in the theaters. But I'd say I would probably the family was with me the first time just be for logistical sake, because then
Mhm.
it's, like, easier to get out. I was like, "Alright, we're all going here, folks." And then later on, sometimes they're going, "What, you're gonna go back and see it again?" Now it's kinda funny. We were talking just recently about the Mandu Grogu movie, and my mother, who stays with us now, she even she's seen a couple episodes, and I was like, "You know what? I think let's take you to one of these." And she's like, "Yeah, let's do it." And I'm like, that's the kind of thing where it's like, yeah, that's the kind of spirit I want. Now sometimes it's like getting everybody, especially if it's a Star Wars movie, they're like, all right, we got to go to another one. The old man's dragging us to another one. But I think back then, I think there was some excitement because I remember taking my son. His first movie was Attack of the Clones. He was like months old. We didn't last very long, and he was probably 4-ish. We went. I remember that one because we went to see Revenge of the Sith on Father's Day because I have the poster, the "Who's Your Daddy?" But it is kind of
Nice.
funny that, like, I don't really have we probably saw it near when it debuted because I wanted to see it right away. But yeah, I think it's kind of funny because some of that we were so precise on where we were when we saw it. That is one where I don't really remember that much about it other than being very happy. I remember Rogue One coming not long after that, a year later, and I was nearly in tears going, "I'm satisfied. It was a good
Mhm.
movie." But yeah, I think that's probably how it went down. We took the family, because we have a theater not too far from us, an AMC, not one of those cool Alamo draft houses with all the cool stuffs. But, uh but yeah, I remember being very pleased when it came out.
Oh, that's great. And it's always nice to go with family too, because then you feel like you can talk about it once you get home and you don't have to worry about spoiling things for anybody else if they do want to go see it. So that's always a good thing. All right. So since obviously The Force Awakens introduced us to so many new characters, and we also had some nostalgic ones, as you pointed out, who is your favorite character from The Force Awakens?
Oh, I would have to say that I remember I remember talking about it. Now I have to go back. I wish I would have wrote it down because I was like, not long after, I'm like, my 5 favorite Rey moments. Because I remember just her really selling it, and it really punctuates back to the matter we'll be discussing. But I remember, like, it was great to see. I loved the new characters, and tonight we'll be talking about, Finn and Poe and how well they were put together. I loved BB-8. Um, I remember Balatik. I didn't know his name then, but I had, Tell That to Kanji Club, that T-shirt very early in my return to fandom before I got connected, and that was one of my favorite things. But yeah, just I would have to say probably Ray, just because I think it was really refreshing, and Daisy just really knocked it out. And her interaction with Harrison Ford, and with Adam Driver, and with uh, everybody, just really so good.
Hmm.
Indeed. All right. The last one I got for you before we get into the segment is, what was your favorite scene from The Force Awakens?
Oh, that's tough. I do. Boy, at that one, I'd have to almost think. I like the fight between Rey and Kylo Ren in the snow, the lightsaber fight. Um, it's interesting that that whole Maz Kanata's, the vision she has when she touches the Luke's lightsaber. Spoilers. Um, that was interesting. And you saw that in the Knights of Ren and all that. So, but I would have to say, yeah, I really liked their fight, because I think that they really worked off of each other very well, and you just kind of really felt you were being teed up for something that was going to be pretty cool going
Mhm.
forward.
All right. Very cool.
Great
That's a good
choice.
answer. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into the segment. So, like I said a moment ago, we're talking about a portion that picks up at about 10 minutes, 41 seconds and runs to 23 minutes and 40 seconds. And right off the bat, we get Rey. She is in her scavenger gear. We don't see her face because it's behind the makeshift goggles that she took from an Imperial Stormtrooper's helmet. And she's otherwise got scars and things wrapped around her. She's inside a Star Destroyer. It's very cavernous in there. And we see her rappel down a rope after she's pulled off a few parts. And once she gets outside, she finishes off the last of her canteen, then slides down the sand dune to her waiting speeder. This is the first opportunity we get to hear Ray's theme, written by the maestro himself, John Williams, playing in the background. We see a few moisture evaporators there amongst the scenery, and she loads up her speeder before heading to Nema outpost there on Jakku. So, Greg, you know, first shots of Ray, a little bit of a storytelling moment here, kind of get to know her background. What did you think about this opening introduction for her?
I loved it because, one, it's about 3 minutes before she says anything, and so she really has to carry it, and I like the fact that it does show the fact that she's incredibly athletic. She's able to work her way around. I loved the Star Destroyers, the ruins of all this, because it's just really cool to see. And now, thinking of going back and reading, the Battle of Jakku, I'm hoping I'm going to see some of this stuff, because I'm like, hey, I bet you they all get names now. But you really do see how resourceful she is, what she can do when she's, just kind of like trying to eke out the last little bit of the water from her canteen, when she's watching that other very older scavenger. Sorry, I'm not trying to be ageist. Um, and just wondering, is this going to be my life? So you see, not only she knows what she has to do to survive, but she is wanting a little more. And then she's marking off the days. We don't really know why yet. A little later on, she does say, my family's coming back. And then everything from making the bread to, a very playful moment when she's putting on the helmet, and kinda as she sees that ship take off, and you really see there's still this sense of awe that there's, maybe there's something else, and I wonder what's out there, and I wonder what it was like. And, like I said, almost no dialogue, but it says so much without really saying anything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Jay, how about you? What do you think about this from this opening scenes in the Star Destroyer and get to see. I mean, like Greg pointed out, there's not a whole lot of dialogue, so we're basically just kind of watching her do her thing here.
Mhm.
But what did you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, as they always say, a picture's worth 1,000 words anyway. And this is our first glimpse at our first hero taking a new hero's journey in the galaxy of Star Wars. And so I know sitting there for the first time, I was all about, okay, who is this Rey going to be? What's her story going to be? What kind of a character is this going to be anchored, with, how is her story going to propel us forward through this whole thing? And so, obviously the way that she was dressed blended right into the background. You could tell, as Greg pointed out, that she was very resourceful as a scavenger. She definitely made sure that she was using every resource that she had and she wasn't being wasteful. Greg, as you pointed out, she was keeping tallies of her days there. We didn't know why quite just yet, but it seemed to me that she was being intentionally hopeful for something, but we didn't know what at the time. And, Star Wars is always grounded in hope. And so from the get go, it seemed like Rey was going to be a character that obviously we were gravitating towards because we knew that there was going to be a lot riding on her and she was going to be, again, the new hero of the saga. But I will say that one of the things that I don't know if I would say it took me out of her character necessarily, but and I don't know if you guys felt the same way, but I felt like some of her movements were just really almost like jerky in a way. Like they were just really emphasized, like almost over exaggerated in some ways. Like she was, like you pointed out, Greg, when she was getting that last little bit of water out of her cantina, it was just almost like cinematic in a way that was a little over the top. So I thought, okay, this is interesting. We're going to give her a little bit of time here, but I was thinking to myself, gosh, if I was living on a desert planet and it was so hot and everything, I would not be exaggerating. I would be so lethargic, but
Mhm.
but maybe that's just me. So, but anyways, in a nutshell, that was my first impressions of Rey. But what about you, Dennis?
Well, the conversation's drifted off a bit here from, again, this opening scene with the Star Destroyer and her drinking the water and such like that. So I'll kind of drift into some of the other things that occurred to me with Rey. Is that, yeah, so she is our, you know, she hasn't had her hero's journey moment where she's got the call to action, so to speak, in this situation. We're just getting to know her. But the contrast is like when we meet Luke, of course, he's a kid on another desert planet, and we just kind of see him going about his day. But of course, he's surrounded by his loved ones, and it is for him, it's I can't leave them. They need me. This is what's holding me back from going on an adventure and following my dreams. Meanwhile, it's the absence of family for Rey, is what we're going to find out here, which keeps her pegged to this place. She does not want to leave because she's waiting on somebody. Conversely, for as much grief as this movie gets from time to time, just being like a remake of A New Hope, I think it kind of ignores some of the details in that regard, in that, Rey has got a different motivation than Luke did. And so that's what occurs to me over these opening scenes that we get with her. I kind of like this like willful naivety that she has, which, we, as Greg was pointing out, when we finally get to see her go home to her fallen, the AT that's corroding there in the desert, and she's built a home inside. She makes her food and then she goes outside and she's eats it all up and licks the plate and then puts on her X-Wing helmet and is just kind of like looking around, just kind of enjoying being her. And then later, after she meets BB-8, so I'm really skipping ahead, she's this enthusiasm and this belief that her family is going to come back for her, all evidence to the contrary. I mean, it's been years and years and years and years. I mean, she doesn't use like the 5 hashes, the 4 hashes and a cross hash in order to mark the days. And so it's a little hard to even get some idea of how many of these she's made over time. But there's a lot of backstory about Rey that's given to us without them telling us directly so many things. Even just the interaction. And I'm going to get back to a bit more of the scene by scene thing here in a second, but just with BB-8, when she asks, so who are you anyways? And he responds, classified. And he goes, oh, classified, me too, big secret. This could have been clunky, but I think it did a pretty good job of giving us some details that we need to know about her without them hitting us over the head with it. So she does get to Nema Outpost along the way. We get a bit more of the world building for Jakku, where we see the fallen TIE fighters and the X-Wings that are sticking out of the sand, and then the giant Star Destroyer that's half buried in the sand in the background. I love those moments. It was one of those things when we saw that in the trailer, just the theorizing around that's like, how could that be? What happened that all these things are sticking out of the ground like this? What was this battle? Where is it? I don't remember this happening on Tatooine. We all thought it was Tatooine before we learned it was Jakku. And then she gets to Nema Outpost and she scrubs her salvage and notices the old woman doing the same thing, as Greg mentioned. And then one of the Tito's wanders by and kind of admonishes her for daydreaming as opposed to working. And then she goes to trade her salvage with Unkar Plutt, who offers her a quarter portion for what she's come up with. Now, we don't know as the audience what a portion's worth, but I don't care what the context is. When you just say a quarter of something and you kind of get her crestfallen look over it, it's bad. But she doesn't complain. She doesn't argue. She just kind of goes about her business there. So, again, what do you all think about this experience in Nema Outpost, Unkar Plutt, and what we learn from that area? And we'll start with you, Greg.
I don't know why I get a little disappointed when you hear from Simon Pegg, who loved Star Wars, wanted to be in it, and was Unkar Plutt. But the only thing is that it's almost like Daniel Craig later on we find out was a First Order trooper, where it's like the voice I couldn't tell. It's like outside of hearing that you were it, cool. But it is interesting. I remember just in kind of looking at it, you go, one, we see a power droid, and so you're like, yes, we see a gonk droid. There's right there. I'm very happy about that. But it's an interesting, how long has this outpost been up? This may be the only thing these folks do. They're just scavengers for him as he runs his little, band of merry scavengers, but you kind of wonder how long this has been going on. But I would say the set dressings for this, so good. It's just in tatters, and things look very like they've been there for a very long time. It seems very hard, a harsh way of life. I mean, I talked she was across from an old lady. That lady could have probably been like 35. I don't know. I don't know what the sun does to you when you're out there, or what the lack of some good moisturizers in the galaxy does, but who knows? But I just, it just really kind of sets the stage. Like, man, this is a place you don't want to hang around in for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm. And Jay, what do you
Yeah.
think about Unkar?
Well, and with Unkar specifically, I just thought, oh gosh, he's going to be another one of these kind of, not necessarily a crime lord, but just an overseer of doom kind of thing, and that he's a guy that's got way too much power, and he thinks he's all that, and obviously he does, because he's only allowing one quarter portion for all of this work that Ray has done, obviously, which is awful. But just real quickly, just backtracking, you mentioned the world building, Dennis, and I wanted to just punctuate that. I had this in my notes, is how beautiful the colorization is, and we know how much sunsets are shown and referenced and pictured in Star Wars, and so it was just really, I think, a perfect thing that as Ray is getting back to Nema Outpost, it's during the golden hour. And, so the golden hour is kind of like that beautiful time of day. And so she has these high hopes of all of her scavenged items that they're going to gain a beautiful price. And then she gets up there and it's like, nope, they're not so much. But then, of course, the sunset after that, there's some beautiful purples and oranges in there. And then you'd also mention, Dennis, the crashed Imperial Star Destroyers, and then the fact that she's living in this AT-AT. And all I could think to myself at the time was, wow, the scope of this is really something, because obviously we've seen these starships in space and we knew that they were huge, but to see them framed in this way, half buried in the sand, these relics of a former time, it makes you wonder, wow, what really happened on this planet, and how did these people survive this? And obviously this is how they're making their living now, is by, you can't even say profiting off of these relics, because they're just living off of them. They're just
Mhm.
surviving off of them. And what does that say about Jakku in general, and what Rey has had to go through?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's the we were talking about the Darth Bane book the other day, and there's just, the same thing was happening there. The miners were basically working their fingers to the bone
Right.
just to survive. They weren't making
Mhm.
profits. They weren't building a future or anything like that. They were, and the same thing is happening here. Is that we can see that Unkar is taking advantage of them. I can't remember what the source is, but I think the source of all these dehydrated portions that he's doling out as compensation for the scavenge, the salvage that get brought into him is like some freighter crashed on the planet, and he got those, and that's how he's portioning things out. And
Mhm.
there's a tie-in book that was part of the path to the Force Awakens. It was a middle grade book, but it kind of told this backstory of Rey, how she uncovers the sand shifts, and she finds like a mostly intact ship, and then she goes and recovers an engine and puts it in there. But
Mhm.
she naively trusts a couple other people, end up stealing it with her. But she had these great dreams of trading the ship into Unkar and getting 2,000 portions. And then she could buy a blaster, and she could do all these things and further improve her lot in life there on Jakku while she's waiting for her family to come back. So anyway, first, that book is not entirely memorable, but I do remember that story and everything that she had gone through there, and just kind of helps paint the picture of that world where it's, you know, in a place that's kind of like devoid of a lot of hope. She still maintains some despite everything that's
Mhm.
going on, because she has something to look forward to, even if it's not realistic. And that is her family finally coming back and getting her off this rock. So
Right.
yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what I meant by intentionally hopeful, as
yeah,
Greg pointed out with her, putting on the helmet and everything. I mean, she could be, at the end of the day, just being like, okay, I got my green bread, time to pull the wool back over my eyes and go to sleep. But no, she goes out, she watches the sunset, she's putting that helmet on, she's, just kind of bebopping around, and she's still a dreamer. And
yeah.
and that's just it's so endearing about her.
So speaking of the bread, how cool is it that that was a real thing? That wasn't a
Oh my gosh,
CGI. That was actually
awesome.
something they made.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
So were you not aware of that,
Mhm.
Craig?
I was not aware of that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's
I remember when the movie came out that that's something that they made sure to point out, that it was a practical effect, and you can find out how they do it if you look hard enough. I didn't go do that research in time for this, but yeah, that was something that they and it sells the whole port of the portions there. It's these little sealed, vacuum sealed packages that she has to rip open and do something with. So
Mhm. Yeah, I believe it
okay,
was a fast-acting, baking soda or baking powder kind of thing. Because I
okay,
know when I was teaching my
oh,
kids
wow.
at school, we did a kind of a mug version of that in the microwave, and there was an exorbitant amount of, like, baking powder in it. So it makes it
no,
very salty, which I guess is probably good for electrolytes on a desert planet?
sure,
Who
sure.
knows?
It's officially called polystarch portion bread.
There
I
you
did
go.
find that out today.
Little
Oh, wow.
nutrient dense, kinda, maybe, sort of. Who knows?
So while she's finishing up her meal, she hears a squabble in the background. She yanks off her helmet and grabs her staff and goes charging off to find that a Tito on the back of some sort of a cyborg mount is throwing a net over BB-8. And it's kind of interesting. The way the scene plays off is that Ray intervenes in this, not so much because she wants to protect BB-8, is that Tito dared, like, poached on her territory. And because when she finally tells off Tito and cuts away the net and Tito leaves, she gives BB-8 directions to Nema Outpost and says, avoid, stay on the ridge, avoid the whatever area, and go about your business. And then they do a great job in this movie of whenever BB-8 talks, or Chewbacca or someone else, the person who responds to them gives you enough in the response, enough of whatever that person said, so you know what the question was, which is, no, you can't come with me. And BB-8 wants to go with her. And it's not until she turns her back and starts walking off, and she hears BB-8 purring and mewling in the background, that she's like, okay, fine, come with me, but tomorrow you go. And of course, we know that's not what happens there. So that's my take on the meeting. Did either of you have other thoughts on that?
Going back to what, Jay had said about, a slight taking you out of the film. I think when she speaks, and I forget whatever language they're speaking, 'cause I think is amongst the first lines of dialogue, it kind of takes you back aside and you're like, you have to kind of get past like, oh, fake language. And you're like, no, no, no. Just kind of roll with it. But, she kind of also kind of has to carry that because she's the only one that the audience could kind of understand. But I think what's really great now is to kind of sit there and look and go, where's Brian Herring? They did a really nice job of getting Brian Herring out of that. But he's so much personality out of BB-8 in that, and you can just see like, okay, how do you say no to BB-8? And I think it kind of allows her to kind of, start off as someone who, hey, that I am a product of my environment here, and it's rough, and hey, I don't have room for another sort of mouth to feed. But at the same time, she's not heartless, and she goes, all right, come on, you can stay one night, and we'll go from there. And I think it does carry a nice little bit of water for her to kind of, because we're still kind of introducing her to the audience, and you're really kind of seeing, okay, we're seeing a lot of different sides, um,
Mm-hmm.
but it's all working out so far. That's what's nice about it.
Mhm. Yeah, and I've always said, I love BB-8 just from the very beginning. It was love at first sight. And what really struck me in the scene with Ray is the fact that, as you pointed out, Greg, she was speaking to the Tito and she was kind of, battling back and forth with him verbally in that way. But the fact that she understood astromech language, and right
Yeah.
away that hit me as, okay, well, it's understandable that she would potentially understand the dialect or the language of one of the other native inhabitants of the world, but how does she know how to speak droid? Where does this come from? Because obviously she's not, flying a starship anywhere, and she probably hasn't seen a whole lot of droids. And then the other thing that struck me about this was just the fact that you would think that she would look at BB-8 and think to herself, "Okay, wow, this is a really cool droid. It's nice and shiny, and it's where did it come from? And could I potentially have use of this droid? Maybe not necessarily to sell him, but just to be a companion or to help him." But no, she right away was like, "Okay, you're going that way, and I don't want anything to do with you." And I often wondered why that is. Why did she want to send him away and kind of write him off so quickly instead of saying, "Hey, I'll help you." Was there a fear on her part that she thought, "Gosh, if I do anything with this droid, it's going to draw attention to me and I don't want that kind of attention?" What are your thoughts on that, either of you?
I think the answer to that question is what friends does she have on Jakku? That what interactions does she have that where it's someone not trying to take advantage of her?
Mhm.
It's Unkar Plutt takes advantage when she's cleaning her salvage. The Tito comes up and barks at her. The old woman she's looking at's by herself. There's nobody there that is being altruistic. And I gave that little backstory thing from that middle grade book I was talking about. I don't even know if that officially counts for anything these days with the way that they treat canon, but I think it's just got that kind of thing. It's like, who is this droid? What is he doing? Is it going to get me in more trouble? Is it someone I can depend on? But she's got qualities. I was comparing her to Luke Skywalker earlier, but she's also got qualities of Han Solo here. We see how quickly her heart of gold shines through all of this. Despite everything that's happened to her life, she she's willing to do the right thing and not necessarily just look out for number one. And we'll see this again here in just a minute. We're going to take a detour to talk about Kylo Ren, but then the next time we see her, we see her doing the right thing once again.
And something else, we're getting the clear indication that she's waiting for something. And so I could see that her not necessarily wanting to rock the boat, but like, look, I don't really need anything to derail me from my parents coming and finding me or sort of like that. So it's like, you know what? I don't need, I've got my schedule, I've got my things, but I want to make sure that I am in a place where I can be found or things can happen because it's going to happen. I
Yeah.
keep marking it off. It's important to me. Even though I've been here a long time, that man, I don't need the distraction, I don't need the headache because I got there are people that are coming back for me, and
Mm-hmm.
want to make sure I'm around when that happens.
And
Mm-hmm.
not to mention, when he asked, "Who are you?" She asked, "Who are you?" His response was, "It's classified." And so it's just like, well, do I really want to get tangled up in something here? I think for her, with that, from that perspective. So, uh, it's she's in a tough spot. I think Greg's right. It's the I'm not doing anything till I can be here. I can be at home. And when my family shows up at Nema Outpost and start asking about Ray, everybody will know me. And so they'll know to wait or to look for me or whatever. But why get involved with this droid, especially one that's up to something? So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I almost wonder if she didn't even like not believe him, because the way that she said it, she's like, classified, huh? Yeah, me too. Big secret.
mm-hmm,
Okay.
yeah,
Or, but then I thought to myself, if she's being serious, okay, what is her big secret?
yeah. Get off my
Mhm.
territory, droid. So,
Yeah.
okay. Well, now we get our first appearance of Kylo Ren and Poe in this segment. Poe's waking up. He's trapped into his interrogation unit in that torture chamber. And Kylo kind of sarcastically addresses him. I had no idea we had the best pilot in the Resistance on board. And then he talks about how he's impressed because no one been able to get out of him what he's done with the map. And Poe, ever the cocky one, says, "Well, you might want to rethink your technique." And then Kylo uses the Force to pull this information out of Poe's head. And then, Poe's trying to resist and says the Resistance will not be intimidated by you. And then Kylo runs off and tells General Hux that the map is in the droid. It's BB unit. It's back on Jakku. Go get it. Okay. There's plenty of things we can talk about here, but the thing that stood out to me the most is that Kylo uses that technique just to pull the information out of Poe's head. And this is something we don't ever see Darth Vader do. He tortures Han Solo to find out information and also to kind of encourage Luke to show up. And then he has Leia tortured in A New Hope once she's aboard the Death Star. He doesn't use any Force techniques to extract information from anyone. And the other reason why this stands out to me is that one of the things that we know is how badly Kylo Ren, once we discover that he's been Solo later in this movie, wants to be like his grandfather, wants to emulate Darth Vader, and is kind of chasing that power. But this is the second time in this movie already we've seen him use Force powers that we never saw Vader use.
Mhm.
He froze the blaster bolt at the beginning of the movie, and now he's using the Force to extract information out of his prisoners. I mean, he tortured them anyway, but which is kind of weird when we think of someone who's ultimately going to get redeemed. But regardless, what do you all think about this scene and this interaction between Kylo and Poe?
Well, it's our second interaction, so we all know that Poe is a smart aleck, and he doesn't fear too much. But I do like their interaction, and you love learning new force powers. And in here, you see it's quite dense. I mean, you've got a really big close up of Poe there, and then once he's kind of finished with them, it's kind of funny now looking back at the Force Awakens of how serious Hux is here, and oh, you got a hard road ahead there, General Hux, General Hugs, I should say. But it's interesting that we're just seeing we're seeing a really intimidating Kylo Ren. I mean, we have no idea what's coming yet.
Mhm.
Yeah. And with Kylo Ren too, like as we talked about in the last segment, with him freezing that blaster bolt in the air until he chose to release it. He is obviously extremely strong as a force user. And so some of that, we've talked about before as well. Is it because Anakin lost now that he's, was more machine now than man kind of thing? Did he lose a lot of that humanistic ability to wield the Force? And maybe because Kylo Ren is his grandson, if we don't know that yet, but does he have that innate ability to be that strong in the Force? Or has this just been something that maybe in his self education has figured out from other sources, as Dennis and I were just talking about, with Darth Bane being self educated and, that type of thing. Could it be that? But another thing that struck me with this too is the fact that again, as you pointed out, Greg, Poe is just being Poe in this instance, but it almost makes you wonder if this wasn't the first time that Poe had encountered Kylo Ren, because he kind of knew how to get his goat. You know what I mean? He knew how to get under his skin, and he knew how to instigate him, much to his own dismay, obviously, as this plays out. But is he just kind of being Poe, and that's just his comeuppance for taking taking
Yeah.
his sarcasm to that level?
Yeah, I think this is just Poe being Poe. I mean, thinking of the beginning of The Last Jedi when he's about to attack the dreadnought and he has that message for General Hux. And he's pretending like he doesn't understand that that's Hux that's actually there. And it's like, yeah, I'll hold.
Love that scene.
And,
Yep.
he passes just on that message, it's about your mom. And then all of a sudden, Hux is open fire. So I think this is just a skill of Poe's. He knows how to get under people's skin in this situation. And he uses words like this, in this talk back as a defense or as an offense at times as well. So it doesn't get Poe off of his game, but I just don't know that Poe knows any other way. So for sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and start moving forward here a little bit. Back on Nema Outpost, Rey just, has already given up on the, tomorrow you go, and she's at Nema Outpost with BB-8 and encouraging him not to give up hope. He still might show up, and she knows all about her waiting. This is kind of the expo that we were talking about here. Her family, they'll be back. And then once again, Unkar Plutt takes advantage of her by only offering her a half portion for all 5 pieces that she brought in, when the previous week they were worth that each. And then he offers to buy the droid BB-8 for 60 portions. And she considers it for a second. And you could see just her reaction to that. That's more than she's probably ever seen at one time in her life. But she rejects the offer. The droid's not for sale. She does the right thing. And then she leaves, and Unkar calls someone to tell them to follow Rey and get the droid. Okay, so we learn a lot in this little brief, it's not even a minute's long segment, that Rey is someone who's going to do the right thing. She's not going to fall for temptation in this regard. Unkar is as greedy as it gets, and I suspect he deliberately reduced the value for that those things were worth to try and tempt her into taking his offer for the droid. And then she wanders off. But, other observations that either of you have about this brief scene?
I do kind of like, watching her reaction, and the heart starts racing, and she's just kind of looking at that, and just kind of going back and kind of watching her facial reaction to it, and just Daisy just doing such a great job here, because what would happen if you were given something for something that you probably know is, I probably shouldn't, but you can see it racing across her mind, in real time. It's like, oh man, this is, it's changing, but it's amazing to kind of watch that. And like you said, in such a short amount of time, a lot of emotions, a lot of processing. And, thankfully for BB-8 and us, she does the right thing.
And we learn so much about Rey right off the bat. I mean, we know she's, like we said, she's hopeful. She has integrity, because obviously the fact that she didn't sell BB-8 speaks volumes about her. And Dennis, earlier you were alluding to a comparison between she and Luke Skywalker, and the fact that they were, both on desert planets and they had these goals. But I feel like Rey's goals are rooted more in empathy and compassion, and Luke's was rooted more in ambition and trying to get off the planet and kind of leaving things behind, where Rey was searching for things. So there's a contrast there too.
Indeed. All right, so now we got a whole lot of action here with Poe and Finn's big adventure. And it picks up with FN 2187. He's not Finn yet. Wanders into Poe's detention room and tells the other stormtrooper that Ren wants the prisoner. And then he marches him down a hall and ducks him into a little corner and pulls off his helmet and asks Poe if, can you fly a TIE fighter? And Poe's response is, you're with Resistance? What? No. I'm breaking you out. And I can fly anything. And then FN 2187 gets really excited by that, and Poe asks, why are you helping me? I'm sorry. I laugh every time I think about this scene because the way that Poe sees right through Finn here. He goes, so Poe says, "Why are you helping me?" And FN 2187's response is, "It's the right thing to do." And Poe, out missing a beat, just looks at him like, "You need a pilot." And so he agrees, and then Poe's like, "We're gonna do this," and he gets that big cocky grin, and a bromance is born between these two. So, Poe gets marched down into the hangar. FN 2187 is talking to himself, "Stay calm, stay calm." And then Poe doesn't realize and says, "I am calm." And Finn says to himself, "I'm talking to myself." And they get into a TIE fighter. Okay, so these first moments between the two, I love the pairing of these two characters. They have so much chemistry. I think all three of them do. Poe and Rey don't get a whole lot of screen time together, but across the sequel trilogy, Finn and Poe have their moments, and it just these two, John and Oscar just work well together here. I think it's a good match here, and you can see it early on with this. But what do you guys think? I mean, I like I said, I couldn't help but laughing when I was thinking about those lines here. But what are your all's reactions?
I just think it's amazing how fast, and we're talking in milliseconds, how it just works between those two. And in some cases, you wonder about the movie that could have been had there not been such a reliance on a lot of the OT, but these folks allowing to have the adventure together. We see it in bits and pieces, and there is a whole section of this movie where Poe disappears. But I'm not the guest for that one. That someone else is going to have to take a hard look at that one. But it's so much fun to go back through and you go, "Man, I wish this was just such a longer adventure," because they just go back and forth, John Boyega and Oscar Isaac. I mean, man, they just bounce back and forth, and you're just like, "This is amazing. This is Star Wars right here," because 'cause you're seeing that Luke and Han relationship where it's all fast and they're in a pickle. They've gotta get out. The dialogue is really good, and you're just not really expecting it to work. Just wow, it's just amazing. And then they're trying to get out and the TIE fighter stuck by the fuel pipe and they're sitting there trying to, it's just really fun, and they're figuring it out together and you're like, man, let's just have a whole movie of this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like, it's hard to play against the nostalgic art of, like, because as good as this is later on, you know Han and Ray are amazing together. But man, I wish we could have had more of this along the entire sequel trilogy because it was just amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do think that Poe and Finn, FN 2187's relationship from the very beginning, their bromance, as you put it, Dennis, I love that, is just magical. I mean, as you said, they just have this dialogue chemistry, they have this humor chemistry, the whole 9 yards. And we had talked about this on the last episode as well, that we've never really seen a stormtrooper's face before. We've never humanized them before. And wow is, and I'm going to call him Finn because we're getting to that point, but he is so human that he's clunky.
Mm-hmm.
And I love it.
Mhm.
He's so for real when he says, stay calm, stay calm. I am calm. No, I'm talking to myself. So he's realistic, and he knows that he's got to do this, and he's so sincere. When he looks at Poe and says, "Because it's the right thing to do." Poe just immediately knows, okay, this guy's for real. He needs to get out of here. And also what's amazing to me is the whole idea that with Finn, it's almost a nature versus nurture thing. He's got choice versus conditioning. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? So his choice is to do the right thing versus the conditioning that he's always known. Like, he's never had a name, but yet he's choosing the right thing to do because he knows it is. And that just speaks volumes to me as a character.
Yeah, I'll push back on that just a little bit here because his motivation is he wants to go AWOL. He wants to leave. It's not even that he's
He wants
defecting to the
to.
resistance. He wants out of the First Order. He couldn't shoot at the villagers, and he didn't want to be put in that position at all. Poe is his ticket out of here. He needs someone that's going to fly him away. And here's a guy that, Kylo Ren, although not in front of Finn, is identified as the best pilot in the resistance. So this is the guy that can do it. I don't doubt that he does have good intentions, but later in the movie, he doesn't want to go fight the First Order. And so when they get to Maz Kanata's palace, he's looking for a way out there. And he, later when they go back to Starkiller Base, it's all about rescuing Rey, not necessarily taking down the First Order. He comes around. This is his arc throughout the movie. And this is
Mhm.
kind of like where the seeds are planted for that arc, where there is something that's bigger than him that he's got an interest in looking out for. And it doesn't actually get fully resolved in this movie. It's The Last Jedi where it really
Right.
germinates and sprouts, that he crosses over, when he's trying to escape from the resistance ship, the Radis, and Rose catches him in the act. And then it's over the course of that movie that he further develops this idea of fighting for something bigger than him.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, but at
so
this point, that's what I'm saying though. It's because
yeah.
we don't know what's happening further down the line. He
Mhm.
just witnessed all of this happening at the village. Like, yeah, he wants out, but he feels that it's the right thing to do. So at this
Sure.
point, that's the keyhole that we're looking through.
Mhm.
And it
So
also
they
is a
get
nice,
oh, go ahead.
interesting parallel. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Interesting parallel between this and the opening scenes of Andor season 2, where, Cassian is talking to that young defecting Imperial engineer and, who's afraid to even look at him because, "Oh, I was told not to look at," and, where he has that kind of excitement that we see, Poe have here about, "Here's another one who at least is locked in, he gets it. She
Mhm.
gets it," and it's kinda fun now if you kinda compare those 2 scenes about like, yeah, this is what it's all about, and, I'll see you down the road, as it were,
Yeah.
but it's fun. It was fun to revisit that, but when you see in this and you just see them lock eyes, you go, "Man, yeah, total bromance here. It's gonna be great," and I think they'll be okay in the long run.
Indeed. So now they're in the TIE fighter, and Poe gives Finn a crash course on how to use the weapons, and they start to take off, and boing, they get stuck on the cable that's still attached to the ship. And Finn starts shooting up the entire hangar as they struggle to get themselves free. They do. The ship moves faster and has more maneuverability than Poe anticipated. They immediately develop some chemistry there in the cockpit with how to line up shots and take them. And in the midst of all this, after Poe is instructed to blow up as many of the cannons as they can, he asks him, "Hey, what's your name?" And FN2187 responds, "My name's FN287." FN, what? Well, the only name they gave me. And so he said, "Well, I'm not calling you that. FN. I'm going to call you Finn." And so, and Finn likes that. So again, the bromance here is now moving into its toddler phase, as they have, it was birthed just a moment ago. And now they've got names for each other. They know we're good to meet each other. And they continue to take out cannons, and then the ventral ones come online, and right as they're having their first argument, they're heading back to Jakku so that Poe can get his droid, because it has a map that leads straight to Luke Skywalker, and Finn just wants to get out of there. It's like, we can't go back to Jakku, we got to leave. And then they get shot down. You got to be kidding me. Boom, there we have it. There it goes. So uh I collapsed like the last 4 minutes of this, 4 or 5 minutes of this segment, into that inartful 30 seconds of description I just gave y'all here. I love the naming, Poe giving Finn a real name, something that's more of an identity than a serial number, so to speak. But what other observations do either of you have about this segment?
Mm. Just that it feels, like George liked fast things, and it feels very fast. And, it's interesting when you see the tie go back through and they take out those cannons. It's very reminiscent of when Poe is taking out the ones in The Last Jedi on the Dreadnought. And you just see just a skosh of his flying, as we'll see later on in The Force Awakens. Yeah, one of the best pilots out there. But just once again, they just work off each other so well, and you just under this, you really feel the tension of this because it's just going at a mile a minute, and just as soon as they kinda get things going, the TIE fighter gets shot. Um, but a great scene as this, last freeze frame has them, I see, I see, you know, Finn to the front, and then I see just uh, Poe kind of looking around, and I hadn't really even kind of noticed, you know, because it goes by so fast, and it's been fun to kind of freeze frame some of these shots because the cinematography and the way these things are captured. Uh, can't say
Mhm.
enough about how gorgeous this movie is, especially early on, just in the scenes that we have, just from the sunsets to the space battles to, you know, to the open desert and the bombed out imperial ships. I mean, just can't say enough about how gorgeous this movie looks.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's truly gorgeous, and you were saying about, George Lucas, faster and more intense, wasn't that what he always said? And, getting back to what you said too, Dennis, I mean, just giving FN2187 the name further humanizes him and makes him feel like he's someone. He's not just a number. So I think
Mhm.
that's definitely very important. But a couple quick hits also, um, when Poe says, "Wow, this thing really moves," it was another kind of surprise moment for him, kind of like in the last segment when he gets onto the ship and he looks around and he's just like, "Whoa, like this place is huge," kind of thing. So it's just another way that I think maybe I don't know if I want to necessarily say that the resistance is kind of maybe underestimating,
Mhm.
what's going on with the First Order, but perhaps. But I loved getting to see things like the targeting computers and just the way that they were utilizing the cannons and things and the lasers and stuff on the TIE fighter, because I mean that's Star Wars DNA, and I just
Yeah.
love the fact that it's continuing to be the same that we've seen since 1977, and it's not something that they ever felt like, oh, we need to change this or improve on this, because it's perfect the way that it is. And the other thing that really struck me on this is just the fact that Kylo Ren knew right away which stormtrooper it was that defected with Poe.
Yeah.
When Hux told him about it, he's like, it was FN2187. He just knew right away. And so there was some kind of a connection that Kylo has had with Finn the entire time, just kind of seeing what he's all about and kind of like, yeah, I see you, dude, kind of thing. And now it's like, okay, this is the guy. This is the one that we're looking for.
Yeah, you're right. It was that whole, when Finn didn't shoot any of the villagers there down on Jakku, and he turns around and Kylo's just staring at him. And now it's like, well, Kyle's like, well, it's obvious. If it was anybody, it was going to be this guy, who's not with the First Order program here. So, yeah, this is a great scene. I like what you had to say, Jay, about Poe's reaction, because he says, "I always wanted to fly one of these here," and we know he's engaged First Order TIE fighters at times, but engaging them in flying one or two different things. And
Right.
so it's just yeah, he's Oscar Isaac's a good actor. He's been good in everything I've ever seen him do. And so just he really, really helps drive everything that happens in these scenes. And again, I said it before, I'm going to gush about it again. The chemistry he's got with John Boyega here just sells this, makes it so good. The way they can hoot and holler together and celebrate when they've taken out the cannons. Did you see that? Did you see that? Yeah. And so it's just a lot of fun. This is a great segment, and we're gonna have to wrap things up here because we kind of run out of time. But I almost wish this segment was longer, so we just keep going on about this here because we do get more John Boyega scenes here, and then he gets to meet Ray in the upcoming portion we're about to talk about, and that's gonna be a lot of fun
Mhm.
too.
Yeah. I do have one other question, and Greg, I'll address this to you first. So when they're in the TIE fighter and Poe basically says, "Oh yeah, we got to get this droid back because he has a map directly to Luke Skywalker." It's like, you just met this guy and you're
Mhm.
spilling the beans like all over the place. Do you really think that's such a good idea? I mean, I know he's helping you get off of the ship and he's got the whole connection thing going on, but did you think that was a little preemptive on Poe's part?
I would say, yeah, militarily, strategically, that was probably a very dumb thing to do. But I would say probably at the time, and if you only had the chance to, like, all right, I've got to play my trump card here. I've got to, that's what it is. We've come this far together. hey, you're in. I don't think there's any going back for either of us. If either of us go back, we're toast. So we might as well just lay all our cards on the table. But yeah, it's a little odd that they say that, because even later when how close Finn keeps it to the vest, when he's dealing with with Ray and with Han until Han figures out he's wearing the wrong boots. Um, that yeah, it was a lot to kind of flash down. You're like, but okay, we've I guess in the plot convenience playhouse, we got to move things forward,
Sure.
and
Right.
everybody's got to be on the same page here.
Mm-hmm. Dennis,
I
what did
guess
you
my
think?
yeah, my take on that is what did Poe have to lose? I mean, for all he knew, Finn knew about the map because that's why the First Order showed up at Jakku in the first place was to get the map
Mm.
from Lor Santeca, and
Mm-hmm.
Poe just happened to be there. And the other thing about it is that Poe told BB-8, "I'll come back for you," and Poe probably doesn't believe he's got the time or the opportunity to leave at this point and come back. No, that's exactly what happens. He ends up having to leave, and we don't get that here. It's in the novelization for this book, but he's taken this chance to go get BB-8 and get off world before the First Order can get to him, and of course he didn't plan on getting shot down, so that further complicated his plans. But
Yeah, just a little.
yeah, all right. Okay, well, that brings us to the end of the segment. Greg, thanks for joining us once again. This was a lot of fun. Glad you could make it. And we were talking a little bit about Rebel Base Card at the top of the show, but why don't you remind everybody about your show and where they can find you and what you got going on?
Once again, I just want to thanks for coming on. I love how you guys do this, and I guess a little bit of our second breakfast kind of takes a page from your book where you can kind of like work on it. You have time to chew on a segment or an episode all throughout, and it's kind of fun because that way, if people want to play the home game, yeah, it's a 10-minute scene, folks. Doesn't take long. You're going to really enjoy watching it again, and it's kind of fun because a lot of times you sit and watch these things, you'll definitely find something new, or once you kind of slow down some of these, it's been a great exercise. Um, like I said, we have been Greg Cass and I, who do the Breakfast Pack episodes, our little kind of like insert series. We've been kind of we're getting ready to talk about the trailer. But I think we just finished. Like there was the big welcome to 2026 episode that Dennis you were on, and then for second breakfast we were doing Andor season 2. But one thing I was very, very happy recently is having Mark Newbold from Fantha Tracks on to talk at length about his tenure with Star Wars Insider, which is kind of coming to a sad close here in a couple of issues. But to get a chance, because he's been writing for for Star Wars Insider for 20 years, and he's been writing since he was a kid, doing some fanfic. So Mark's been nice enough. He comes on about once a year. Last year we got to meet in person again at London Film and Comic Con, and it was a great chat. It went a lot longer than I thought, but he's just gold every time. And so those are the kind of conversations that I like having. We kind of bounce back and forth. We talk about cards, collecting, but a lot of times it's people in the community, and those are some of my favorite episodes. And as we kind of march towards, as we had Jon Dennis talking about all the great things that are coming up, Maul, Shadow Lord, and of course we've got the celebration ticket-a-thon, as everybody's going to try to be able to see how many tickets they're going to get, and even the possibility of like, what if I didn't get a ticket, I'm going anyway. Because how can you not be at the party in LA next year, man? That's the thing. But at any rate, but yeah, more great stuff. You can find me on the socials at Rebel Base Card on Instagram mainly, X, Blue Sky, Threads, and all that. And then if you want to look at Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can just look for the Rebel Base Card Podcast.
Perfect.
All right. Well, again, thanks so much for joining us and helping us out with this segment. I really appreciated your input. But
My pleasure.
with that, we'll go ahead and wrap this up. And thank you all for joining us for this episode of Podcast Stardust and this segment in our Force Awakens series. We hope you enjoyed it. And if so, please hit the subscribe button on your podcatcher of choice. And we appreciate your ratings and reviews wherever you can leave those. You can find the entire back catalog of the show over on retrozap.com. Jay, you want to go ahead and remind everybody what those social media contacts are and where else we can be found online one more time?
Absolutely. So we are conveniently found on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust. And you can always check out our plethora of Pinterest boards. We've got tons of fun things for everything Star Wars over there. and our 2 YouTube outlets, which includes the traditional YouTube as well as YouTube Music. So please head over to both of those, like, subscribe, and share those out, and let us know what you thought of this segment and if you had any thoughts on it yourself. And you can also drop us a line on that line of thinking, podcaststardust@gmail.com. And we also have our TeePublic store where you can pick up one of 7 different show logo designs. And the link to that is in our show notes. And I was actually just over there today, and they actually have hats and workout shorts and socks, Dennis. They have
Wow.
socks now.
Okay.
So all the things.
Yeah, the inventory has grown. Okay, I'll have to go
It
check that out myself.
has.
All right.
Yeah.
You want to remind everybody about what you got going with cosplay before we wrap it up?
Absolutely. So you can always check out my cosplay on my Instagram, which is at j.snipscosplay. And most likely find me as Ahsoka or Hera or the Fourth Sister or my original concept Mandalorian. But you can also find some non-Star Wars things as well. So once again, that is j.snipscosplay on Instagram.
Okay, well, upcoming on the show on Friday, we will be getting into the week's news. And then on Monday, we'll kick off a fresh week with another episode of the Clone Wars in our rewatch series. So with all that, thanks for listening to episode 1004, Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great rest of your week. And until next time, may the Force